The crystal stem snapped in her hand, and for a heartbeat it was the only sound in the ballroom. The orchestra's violins seemed to choke mid-note, the murmur of conversation dimmed, and the chandelier light caught on 1,000 watching eyes. Red wine spilled in a dark rush across the polished marble, spreading like a stain on perfection. Amira Khan froze. She had been balancing the tray, 6 glasses poised in a careful arc, weaving her way between gowns worth more than her yearly rent. The governor's autumn charity ball was the kind of event she normally saw in glossy magazines left behind on subway seats, not a place she ever belonged. She was only here because she needed the money, because her father's medical bills were piling up faster than she could pay them, because the catering company had called her last minute and she had said yes without thinking. But now she was standing in the center of the ballroom with red wine bleeding across white marble, and the silence felt like it could devour her. "You clumsy girl." The voice came from the top of the staircase, smooth and sharp like glass. All heads tilted upward as Eleanor Whitmore descended. She was everything the society pages promised. Silver hair sculpted into an immaculate twist, diamond necklace like frost around her throat, gown the color of midnight skies. Eleanor Whitmore, wife of Governor Richard Whitmore, queen of this evening's spectacle, a woman who had been photographed with presidents and monarchs. Her eyes fixed on Amira, narrowed with disdain. "You don't belong here," Eleanor said, her voice ringing clear enough to carry over the hushed ballroom. "This is not your world." The words struck harder than the broken glass. Amira's cheeks burned, and her breath stuttered in her chest. She wanted to kneel, to grab the shards, to mop the floor, to vanish into the kitchen where the other servers hid behind swinging doors. But she couldn't move. Not when every phone in the room was already raised. Not when the guests leaned in like vultures circling a wounded creature. "Eleanor," began a man nearby. One of the Whitmore sons, perhaps, though his protest was weak. Swallowed quickly by the gathering buzz. "No." Eleanor's smile cut thin, practiced for cameras. "These events demand precision, presentation, and clearly, some people are unfit for such standards." Her gaze swept Amira's brown skin, the catering uniform that pinched at the shoulders, the headscarf tied neatly but plain. Then, with deliberate cruelty, Eleanor tilted her chin toward the doors. "The service entrance is around back. Perhaps you'll be more comfortable there." A ripple of gasps moved through the ballroom. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered. The orchestra, uncertain, tried to resume a waltz, but the sound faltered as phones continued to rise, capturing every angle. Amira's throat closed. She bent to gather the broken stem, ignoring how the glass cut her fingers. Her chest ached with humiliation, but beneath it, something hotter flickered. Anger, raw and dangerous. Still, she kept her eyes down, because to look up would mean letting them see her tears. But she wasn't invisible. Not tonight. From the far side of the ballroom, a young man pushed forward. His tuxedo jacket was open, his bow tie loosened, and his hair fell in a mess across his forehead. He didn't look like the other guests, polished and perfect. There was a restless energy about him, the kind of presence that drew attention whether or not he wanted it. His name, though Amira didn't know it yet, was Julian Reyes. Journalist, troublemaker. A man who had been invited to this gala not because the Whitmores liked him, but because he had made himself too influential to exclude. "Mrs. Whitmore," Julian said, his voice casual but sharp, cutting through the murmurs. "That's an awfully public way to discipline the help." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor's lips tightened. "Discipline? Hardly. It's a matter of standards. We can't lower them just because someone doesn't." She stopped herself, the unsaid word hanging heavy in the air. "Doesn't belong. Doesn't look like us. Doesn't fit." Julian smiled faintly, though his eyes were cold. "Careful. That sounded like the kind of sentence that headlines are made of." He gestured to the rows of phones already recording. "And trust me, they'll have a field day." The tension thickened, fragile as glass. Governor Richard Whitmore, tall and broad-shouldered, finally moved to his wife's side. He placed a hand at the small of her back, his politician's smile already sliding into place. "Let's not spoil the evening," he said, voice smooth as silk. "Accidents happen. Mrs. Khan." He glanced at Amira, fumbling slightly on her name, as if the syllables were foreign to his practiced tongue. Please see to it the mess is cleaned. That will be all. But the moment had already spiraled beyond his control. The orchestra tried again, but the music was drowned by whispers, by the rustle of movement, by the bright cold glow of 100 screens. Somewhere in the corner, a blogger was already live streaming. Somewhere else, a senator's aide was whispering into a phone. The humiliation had been delivered, the insult broadcast, the story already escaping the ballroom like smoke. Amira fled to the kitchen, blood from her palm smearing against the tray she still carried. She pushed through swinging doors into heat and noise, the hiss of pans and shouts of cooks. Only here, in the chaos of the staff, did she let her breath hitch, her tears fall. But even here, whispers followed her. Did you hear? They said she doesn't belong. It's on video already. She leaned against the steel counter, staring at her reflection in the metal. Her scarf was askew, her uniform stained, her hand trembling with cuts. She wanted to believe she could survive this night, finish her shift, collect her pay, disappear. But the truth was already alive outside those doors, and it would not be silenced. Back in the ballroom, Julian Reyes lowered his phone, the video already uploading. He hadn't planned to make tonight a battleground. But when power dressed itself in cruelty, when the mighty forgot their masks, someone had to bear witness. And he had just found his story. The governor's mansion had never felt so fragile. From the outside, it gleamed like a monument to power, limestone walls glowing under floodlights, manicured lawns stretching like velvet carpets, the governor's flag rippling proudly against the midnight sky. But inside, behind gilded doors and hushed corridors, the Whitmore family's fortress was cracking. The gala had ended hours ago, but the echoes remained. The scattered glass, the half-empty champagne flutes, the whispers that clung to the marble like ghosts. Eleanor Whitmore sat at the long dining table, a glass of brandy untouched before her. Her gown was still flawless, her diamonds still catching the light, but her hands trembled where they rested on the polished wood. "They're exaggerating," she said, her voice sharp, brittle. I didn't say anything wrong. I was maintaining standards. Across from her, Governor Richard Whitmore massaged his temple. He had removed his bow tie, undone the top button of his shirt, but the weight of office clung to him like armor. "It doesn't matter what you meant," he muttered. "What matters is what they heard, and what they recorded." He gestured to the tablet glowing between them. The screen replayed the moment over and over, Eleanor descending the staircase, her voice clear, her words cutting. "You don't belong here. This is not your world." The video had already been clipped, captioned, and shared across half the internet. On one feed, it had 2 million views. On another, hashtags blazed. "Not your world, Whitmore Ball, racism in high society." Eleanor slammed her hand against the table, the sound sharp. "It was an accident. That girl spilled wine all over my floor, over my guests, and suddenly I'm the villain." "You humiliated her in front of 500 people," Richard said evenly. He didn't raise his voice, he never did, but the steel in his tone was unmistakable. "And now the country is watching." From the shadows of the room, their son Nathan stirred. Tall, dark-haired, always half in his father's shadow, Nathan had inherited the Whitmore charm without the discipline. He leaned lazily against the doorframe, scrolling through his phone. "It's trending on every platform," he said casually. Julian Reyes posted the first clip. "You know how his followers eat this stuff up." Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Reyes, that parasite. He's been waiting for a moment like this." "Maybe," Nathan said, shrugging, "but he didn't put those words in your mouth." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Richard finally stood, pacing the length of the table. His mind, trained by decades in politics, was already calculating. "Damage control. First thing in the morning, we'll release a statement. Something about misunderstanding, about respect for staff, about charity values. We'll drown it out with headlines of the funds raised tonight." He turned to Eleanor. "And you will apologize." The word hung like poison. Eleanor's face hardened, diamonds glinting like shards of ice. "I will do no such thing." "Apologizing would be admitting guilt. Do you want me to crawl before that clumsy girl? Before the press?" "Never!" You don't have a choice, Richard snapped, and for once his mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. You've jeopardized everything. The campaign, the donors, the reputation I've built over 30 years. If you won't protect it for me, then for God's sake, protect it for yourself. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the faint buzz of Nathan's phone. He smirked, shaking his head. Too late, he muttered. The story's already out there. They're not calling it a misunderstanding. They're calling it a scandal. Across the city, in a cramped apartment that smelled faintly of cardamom and detergent, Amira sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through her phone in disbelief. Her hands still stung from glass cuts, wrapped now in makeshift bandages, but she barely felt them. The video was everywhere. Her face pale with shock. Eleanor's words sharp and cruel. The laughter in the background. Amira wanted to shut it off, to pretend it wasn't her. But the comments kept flooding in. Disgusting behavior. Fire Eleanor Whitmore. Stay strong, Amira, we see you. Proof racism is alive in 2025. She told her to go to the service entrance? This is literally Jim Crow language. Her phone buzzed with messages from co-workers, from neighbors, from strangers. Some offered solidarity, others wanted interviews. And a few were venomous, blaming her for ruining the gala or accusing her of seeking attention. She dropped the phone onto her bed, covering her face with her hands. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't wanted to be a symbol. She just wanted to earn enough money to keep her father's medicine cabinet full. A knock sounded at the door. Amira. It was her younger brother, Sammy, his voice hesitant. There's someone here to see you, she frowned, rising. When she opened the door, Julian Reyes was standing in the hallway, his hands in his pockets, eyes steady. He looked tired but determined, the kind of man who had chased too many stories to ever turn one down. You don't know me, he said softly, but I think you should. Amira hesitated, suspicion rising. You're the journalist. Guilty, Julian admitted. And I was there tonight. I recorded it. You should know this isn't going away. Her throat tightened. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be a headline. I get that, Julian said. His tone was calm, patient, but there was an urgency beneath it. But the truth is, this isn't about what you want anymore. They made you the story the moment Eleanor opened her mouth. Now you have two choices. Let them control the narrative or tell it yourself. Amira stared at him, torn between fear and anger. Why should I trust you? Because they're already spinning it, Julian replied. By tomorrow they'll call it an accident. They'll say you misheard. They'll drag you through the mud if they have to. But I saw it. The world saw it, and you deserve to be heard before they erase you. Silence stretched between them. In the background, Sammy shifted nervously, looking from one to the other. Finally, Amira exhaled, her shoulders slumping. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to do it alone, Julian said simply. By dawn, the Whitmore estate was swarming with aides, strategists, and publicists. Laptops flickered on every table, phones buzzed in every corner, and the smell of burnt coffee clung to the air. The governor's communications director, a wiry woman named Cassandra, strode into the study with a folder in hand. We've drafted the statement, she said briskly. We frame it as a misunderstanding, emphasize Eleanor's lifelong commitment to diversity in the arts, pivot to the millions raised at the gala. We need her on camera delivering the apology by noon, Eleanor bristled, her chin lifting. I told you I won't apologize. Then you'll destroy us, Cassandra shot back. Do you think the press will let this go? That the opposition won't seize it during campaign season? We can't afford arrogance right now. Richard pinched the bridge of his nose. Eleanor listened to her. This is bigger than pride, but Eleanor's pride was a fortress. She rose from her chair, diamonds flashing. I will not let a clumsy servant girl dictate my fate. I built this reputation. I will not grovel before her, Cassandra's eyes darkened. Then you may have just lost us the election. Far away, in a quiet newsroom that smelled of ink and old coffee, Julian Reyes leaned over his laptop, typing furiously. His article was taking shape. Not Your World, the gala that exposed high society's ugly truth. His editor had warned him to be careful, to avoid lawsuits, but Julian knew this story had weight. This wasn't just about one spilled glass or one cruel remark. It was about the mask of power slipping, revealing what lay beneath. And as he wrote, his phone buzzed with a message from an anonymous number. "If you keep digging, you'll regret it," Julian smirked, shaking his head. He had been threatened before. But this time, he felt the storm building, the kind that could swallow entire dynasties. The Whitmores thought they could control the narrative. But the cracks had already spread. And soon the whole mask would shatter. The city did not sleep. By morning, the Whitmore scandal was everywhere. Screens in subway stations replayed the video with captions scrolling beneath. "Governor's wife humiliates staff at gala." Radios hummed with debates. Was it racism, elitism, or both? Hashtags multiplied across platforms like sparks in a dry forest. In the cafe where Amira sometimes studied between shifts, the television above the counter replayed the clip on loop. Students whispered over laptops. Commuters glanced up between sips of coffee. It was no longer just an incident. It was a cultural flashpoint. Everyone had an opinion, but not everyone had the truth. At the catering company's headquarters, a cramped office smelling of bleach and stale bread, the staff huddled in tense silence. Dozens of them had worked the gala. Dozens had witnessed Eleanor Whitmore's words. And yet the phones were already ringing with demands from lawyers. Deny, deny, deny. "We can't," muttered Rosa, one of the senior servers, her voice tight. "We all heard it. We saw her. They'll want us to lie. Then we lie," said her manager flatly, sweat shining on his forehead. "You think the governor's lawyers won't crush us otherwise? You think they'll keep us on their contracts if we don't play along?" The staff shifted uneasily, torn between survival and integrity. Amira's name was on everyone's lips, some spoken with sympathy, others with resentment. She had become both symbol and scapegoat. In a high-rise office across town, Senator Alan Crawford watched the video with a predator's smile. Crawford had been circling Richard Whitmore's governorship for years, waiting for an opening. Now Eleanor had given him one wrapped in silver ribbon. "This is it," Crawford told his aides, slamming a hand on his desk. "We frame Whitmore as out of touch, elitist, racist. We tie this scandal to every decision he's made. We don't just bruise him. We bury him," his aides nodded, already drafting attack ads. Politics was blood sport, and this scandal was fresh prey. But perhaps the most dangerous witnesses were not politicians or servers. They were the guests, the billionaires, the socialites, the influencers, who had seen everything. Some were horrified, others amused, and still others calculating, because power shifted not just in elections but in drawing rooms and private clubs. And gossip, whispered over champagne, could topple more than any vote. One such witness was Vivian Leclerc, a fashion magnate with a reputation for cruelty hidden beneath charm. She had been standing only a few feet away when Eleanor humiliated Amira, and though Vivian had said nothing at the time, now she replayed it with relish. Eleanor's mask slipped, she told a circle of confidants at brunch the next morning. And once a mask slips, it's only a matter of time before the whole costume falls apart. Her words spread like perfume through the city's elite circles, subtle but intoxicating. Enemies Eleanor hadn't even realized she had began sharpening their knives. Meanwhile, Julian Reyes was chasing threads no one else had. He knew the Whitmores would try to bury the story under money and influence, but scandals never stood alone. They were always attached to something deeper. He visited the gala staff, recording testimonies, though many refused to go on record. He traced catering invoices, discovered inflated costs, and whispered rumors of kickbacks. He followed Nathan Whitmore's trail of indulgence, debts hidden beneath the governor's pristine image. Each lead pointed to cracks in the empire, but Julian also knew that Amira herself was the center. Without her, the story lost its human face. "You need to speak," he urged when they met again in a quiet park. "Not just to me. To the world." Amira shook her head, twisting her scarf between her fingers. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to end." Julian's gaze softened. "I get it. But if you stay silent, they'll own the narrative. They'll say you exaggerated, that you provoked her. Already their people are planting stories. I've seen the drafts. They're painting you as unstable, desperate for attention." Amira's stomach turned. "That's not true." "Then tell your truth," Julian pressed. Look, you don't have to take on the whole system. Just tell the story of that night. People will listen. They need to listen. Amira's silence stretched long, broken only by the rustle of leaves. At last she whispered, "What if I fail? What if they destroy me?" Julian leaned forward, voice steady. "Then you'll know you fought. And maybe, just maybe, you'll inspire someone else to fight too." For the first time since the gala, Amira lifted her chin, eyes burning with something fiercer than fear. The Whitmores, meanwhile, were staging their counterattack. A press conference was scheduled in the governor's mansion, cameras lined up in the grand foyer. Eleanor appeared in a pale suit, her hair immaculate, her smile rehearsed. Richard stood at her side, one hand on her shoulder. "Last night," Eleanor began, voice smooth as silk. "A regrettable misunderstanding occurred. In the excitement of the evening, words were spoken that, taken out of context, have been misinterpreted. I hold the deepest respect for the hard-working staff who made our gala possible, and I regret if any remarks suggested otherwise." Reporters scribbled, cameras clicked, but the air vibrated with disbelief. Misinterpreted. Regret if. No apology, only deflection. One reporter shouted, "Mrs. Whitmore, do you deny telling the server she didn't belong?" Eleanor's smile never wavered. "I deny that interpretation of my words. It was the kind of performance politicians had perfected for decades. But in the age of viral video, it rang hollow. Within hours, the clips of her non-apology spread faster than the original scandal. Captions mocking her carefully chosen words. "Sorry, not sorry," trended by nightfall. But not all witnesses were passive. In a cramped apartment in the Bronx, Jamal Carter sat before his computer, watching the video for the 10th time. Jamal had been a busboy at the gala, invisible in his uniform, ignored by the glittering guests. But he had seen everything, not just Eleanor's cruelty, but the way Governor Whitmore had looked at Amira, the way Nathan had smirked. Jamal knew things others didn't. He hesitated, then opened a direct message to Julian Reyes. "I was there. I saw more than what's on the video. You need to hear this." Julian's reply came instantly. "Let's meet." The story was widening. New voices, new witnesses, each with a piece of the puzzle. Back in her apartment, Amira scrolled through messages. Among the chaos of praise and hate, one stood out, a video from a stranger. It showed Eleanor years ago at another gala. The words were quieter, the cameras fewer, but the tone was the same, dismissive, cruel, aimed at a staff member. Amira's breath caught. This wasn't the first time. Her hands shook as she forwarded it to Julian. "They've been doing this for years," she wrote. Julian stared at the screen, adrenaline surging. The Whitmore scandal wasn't just a single night. It was a pattern, a rot, and now the witnesses were lining up. In the governor's mansion, Eleanor stared at her reflection in the mirror, her mask beginning to crack. For the first time in years, she felt the icy grip of fear. Because power was never just about what you owned, but about what people believed, and belief was slipping through her fingers like sand. "Richard," she whispered, gripping her husband's arm, "what if we can't control it?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Then we crush them before they crush us." But even he could see it now. The cracks were spreading. The witnesses were gathering, and the truth was no longer theirs to bury. The Whitmores were never the kind of family to play defense. When cornered, they lashed out, striking with money, influence, and fear until their enemies crumbled. By the third day of the scandal, the cracks in their empire were obvious. And so, they struck back. It began with silence. Calls that once came regularly to Julian Reyes's phone suddenly stopped. A whistleblower he had arranged to meet canceled at the last moment, voice trembling with some excuse that didn't sound real. Sources who had promised documents now claimed they never had them. The story, alive and crackling just a day before, seemed to wither on the vine. Julian knew why. He had seen it before. Someone was paying people off, tightening the screws, erasing evidence before it reached the surface. He wasn't wrong. Inside the Whitmore mansion, the governor's private study had become a war room. Richard sat at the head of the mahogany table, aides clustered around him, laptops open, voices clipped. Eleanor, dressed in steel-gray silk, paced like a general, while Nathan lounged with a drink, smirking as if the whole thing were an entertaining game. "We've identified 4 staff members who've spoken to press," one aide reported. "We've reached out. They're reconsidering their positions after financial reassurances." "Reassurances," Eleanor repeated with distaste. "Call them what they are, bribes." Richard cut her a sharp look. "We don't use that word here," Nathan chuckled. "Doesn't matter what word you use if the check's clear." The aide coughed nervously and continued. "2 others are refusing to cooperate. We've prepared character files on both. Past arrests, debts, questionable associations. If we leak this strategically, their credibility will collapse." Eleanor's lips curled into a cold smile. "Good. Make an example. Show them what happens when they cross us." Richard leaned forward, voice low. "But we need to go further. This isn't just about silencing staff. We need to control the entire narrative. Eleanor, you'll give an interview. Friendly network, soft questions. We pivot to philanthropy. Paint you as the misunderstood benefactor, attacked by radicals who want to tear down tradition." "And Amira?" Eleanor asked, spitting the name like poison. Richard's eyes hardened. "We bury her. Quietly if possible, publicly if necessary. She doesn't get to destroy us." The first wave hit Amira the next morning. She woke to hundreds of notifications, her phone buzzing non-stop. Headlines screamed her name, not Eleanor's. Who is Amira Qureshi? The troubled past of the gala's accuser, from server to scandal, what she stands to gain. Her stomach knotted as she scrolled. There were lies, claims she had been fired from past jobs, that she had a history of fabricating grievances, that she was tied to radical activist groups. Even her photos were twisted into evidence, captions mocking her headscarf, her accent, her very existence. Tears blurred her vision. It wasn't just the Whitmores now. It was the machine. A vast, merciless machine designed to crush anyone who dared challenge power. The phone rang. It was Julian. "Don't read it," he said the moment she picked up. His voice was firm, urgent. "Don't give them that power." "They're everywhere," Amira whispered. "Everywhere I look, it's me." "Not her. Me. Like I'm the criminal." "That's their playbook," Julian said. "Shift the focus. Make the victim the villain. But listen to me. We can counter this. You're not alone." "I feel alone," she said, voice cracking. Julian hesitated, then, "Meet me tonight. There's someone you need to hear." That night, Amira found herself in a dim apartment above a laundromat, the air thick with detergent and city dust. Julian introduced her to Jamal Carter, the busboy who had messaged him. Jamal was nervous, hands fidgeting, but his eyes burned with conviction. "I saw everything," Jamal said. "Not just Eleanor. The governor, too. The way he looked at you, like you were less than dirt. And Nathan," he laughed. They all laughed. "They think they're untouchable." Amira swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been invisible my whole life," Jamal said. "And for once I don't want to be. They'll come after me, I know. But someone has to say it out loud." Amira stared at him, her own fear mirrored in his. Slowly she nodded. Maybe she wasn't alone after all. But the Whitmores had more weapons. That same night, a black SUV idled outside Amira's apartment. She didn't notice it, but Julian did. He'd grown used to tales, the silent cars that appeared after stories like this. He scribbled the license plate, filed it away. Later, Amira's landlord knocked on her door, sweating nervously. "Listen, I don't want no trouble, but they came by, some men. They said if I didn't evict you, they'd make trouble with the building permits." "I can't lose this place, Amira." Her throat went dry. "They want me out?" He looked at the floor. "I'm sorry." "You got a week. It was intimidation, plain and simple. A message. You don't belong anywhere." Julian was furious. "This is how they operate. Pressure from every angle until you break." "But we won't let them." Amira's voice shook. "How do we fight something this big?" Julian's jaw set. By being louder than their lies. By refusing to disappear. Eleanor, meanwhile, was thriving on the counterattack. She appeared on a primetime talk show, the studio lights softening her features, the host fawning. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've been unfairly maligned," the host said. "What do you want people to know about your heart?" Eleanor placed a hand over her chest, eyes shimmering. That I have spent my life serving this community. That I love every person who works hard to build this city, no matter their background. It pains me, truly pains me, that my words were twisted to mean otherwise. But I will not let this smear campaign stop me from giving back, the audience applauded. The performance was flawless. For those who wanted to believe, it was enough. But for those who had seen the video, who had felt the sting of her words, it was theater. And theater had cracks. Because even as Eleanor's interview aired, a new clip began circulating online. The older footage Amira had been sent, showing Eleanor humiliating another server years ago. The timing was perfect. Her mask was slipping again. Still, the Whitmores pushed harder. Threats escalated. Anonymous calls filled Amira's voicemail. Liar, gold digger, go back where you came from. Her social media overflowed with hate. She deleted the apps, but the words lingered in her mind like shadows. One night, walking home, she felt footsteps behind her. Quick, deliberate, panic surged. She turned a corner, heart pounding, until she burst into a crowded bodega, gasping for breath. The footsteps faded. Julian listened carefully as she told him, his expression grim. They're trying to scare you into silence. But the fact they're this desperate, it means they're losing. Amira clenched her fists. For the first time, anger began to burn hotter than fear. They think I'm nothing, she whispered. Maybe it's time I show them I'm not. In the Whitmore war room, the mood was shifting. Despite their efforts, the scandal refused to die. Eleanor's interview was mocked with side-by-side comparisons to the new footage. Hashtags refused to fade. Witnesses like Jamal were stepping forward. Richard slammed his fist on the table. We're supposed to be in control. How the hell are we losing control? An aide hesitated. Because the narrative isn't ours anymore. It belongs to the people now. Eleanor's eyes blazed. Then we take it back. I don't care what it costs. Nathan smirked, sipping his drink. Careful, Mother. Sometimes the harder you squeeze, the faster it all slips away. For once, Eleanor didn't laugh. That night, Amira sat at her kitchen table, exhaustion etched into her face. But this time she wasn't crying. She was writing, drafting her own statement, not filtered through lawyers or journalists, but her words, her truth. Julian watched her, quiet but proud. Are you sure? He asked. Amira nodded. They've told their story. Now it's time I tell mine. And as she pressed her pen to paper, something shifted. For the first time since the gala, she wasn't just surviving. She was fighting back. The night was heavy with silence when Amira hit post. Her statement, raw and unfiltered, was live. It wasn't written like a politician's speech. There were no lawyers polishing phrases, no strategists shaping spin. It was her voice, trembling but resolute, addressed to the world. I was working. I was doing my job. And I was told, in front of hundreds of people, that I did not belong. That I should go through the back door. I have been told versions of that my whole life. But this time, I will not stay quiet. Within minutes, the words began to spread. By dawn, they were everywhere. Screenshots plastered across feeds, hashtags multiplying like sparks in dry grass. Journalists quoted her, activists amplified her. Strangers rallied behind her, and for the first time since the scandal began, Amira's face was not the target of mockery, but the symbol of defiance. In a cramped newsroom office, Julian Reyes leaned back in his chair, exhaustion softening into relief. He'd seen statements crash before, swallowed by indifference or drowned in counterattacks. But this was different. Something in Amira's words had caught fire. She did it, he muttered. His editor leaned over his shoulder, scanning the screen. The floodgates are opening, Julian. Look at these comments. She's not just a victim anymore, she's a voice. People are listening. Julian nodded, though unease tugged at him. That means the Whitmores will hit harder. They don't lose gracefully. Still, he couldn't deny it. The tide had shifted. By mid-morning, Amira's statement was read on morning shows, debated on talk radio, dissected in classrooms and cafes. Across the city, people replayed Eleanor Whitmore's words, this time not with detached amusement, but with anger. In Harlem, a teacher read Amira's statement aloud to her students, their young faces lighting up with recognition. In Queens, a group of nurses taped it to their staff bulletin board, scrawling beneath it, "We belong here too." In Brooklyn, a protest formed outside the governor's office, homemade signs bobbing above the crowd. No back doors, no more silence. The Whitmores had sought to isolate her. Instead, she was becoming a rallying point. Eleanor, watching from the mansion, seethed. "She dares to speak against me? Against us?" she hissed, pacing the marble floor. Her reflection glared back at her from the gilt-framed mirror, but for the first time, she saw something she hated more than a mirror. Fear. Richard remained calm, though his jaw was tight. "It's noise. It will fade." But Nathan, lounging in his usual careless sprawl, shook his head. "No, Father, it won't. This isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a movement. And movements don't fade, they spread," Eleanor spun on him. "So what do you suggest? We let her destroy us?" Nathan's smile was sharp, almost cruel. "I suggest you stop underestimating the power of outrage. Either we feed it, or we're consumed by it." For once, Eleanor had no reply. That afternoon, Jamal Carter stepped forward. He appeared in a shaky live stream, face lit by the glow of his phone. "My name is Jamal Carter. I was a busboy at the gala. I saw everything. Mrs. Whitmore told Amira she didn't belong." Governor Whitmore laughed. Nathan smirked. They all treated her like she was invisible. "And it wasn't the first time. I've seen them do it before." The video spread like wildfire. Jamal wasn't polished, wasn't rehearsed, but that was the point. He was authentic, and authenticity cut deeper than strategy. Within hours, other staff began posting their own stories. A dishwasher who had worked another Whitmore event. A chauffeur who recalled being berated for speaking with an accent. A florist who remembered Eleanor snapping her fingers instead of using names. Piece by piece, the pattern became undeniable. The scandal was no longer about a single night. It was about a system of entitlement and disdain that stretched years. The governor's mansion turned fortress. Protesters gathered at the gates, their chants rising against the white columns. "No back doors! No more silence!" echoed into the night. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, Eleanor raged. She smashed a glass against the wall, shards scattering across marble. "They're nobodies," she screamed. "How dare they turn on us?" Richard, face pale, rubbed his temples. "It's not about them anymore. It's about the voters. And the voters are watching." For the first time, his voice held doubt. Meanwhile, allies were rallying around Amira. Civil rights groups reached out, offering legal support. Activist leaders invited her to speak at rallies. Even celebrities, cautious at first, began tweeting their solidarity. A famous actress posted, "To every Amira who has ever been told she doesn't belong, we see you. We hear you. You do belong." Amira watched the surge from her tiny apartment, overwhelmed. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why are they listening to me?" Julian, sitting across from her, smiled softly. "Because you spoke the truth when everyone else was afraid. That's all it takes sometimes. One voice to break the silence." Her hands trembled. "But what if I fail them? What if I can't carry this?" "You don't have to carry it alone," Julian said. "Look around you. You've already inspired an army. The Whitmores launched their fiercest counterstrike yet. A series of glossy ads hit the airwaves, painting Eleanor as a misunderstood philanthropist, Richard as the steadfast leader under siege, and Amira as an opportunist manipulated by radical activists. One ad showed slow-motion footage of Eleanor hugging children at a charity event, her voiceover trembling with emotion. "I have always believed in dignity and respect for all. I regret that my words have been twisted to hurt a young woman, but I will not let lies divide us." The spin was slick, the production flawless, but it rang false, because alongside those ads, clips circulated of Eleanor sneering at staff, of Richard brushing off questions, of Nathan stumbling drunk through clubs. The contrast was damning. The more they polished their image, the more brittle it appeared. On the steps of City Hall, Amira faced her greatest test yet. A rally had gathered, hundreds strong, cameras pointed at her. Her knees shook, her throat felt dry. But as she looked into the crowd, faces of every color, every age, something steadied inside her. She stepped up to the microphone. "My name is Amira Qureshi," she began, voice soft but growing stronger. "I was told I didn't belong, that I should enter through the back, but let me tell you, I do belong. And so do you. Every worker, every immigrant, every person who has ever been made to feel small. We belong here," the crowd roared. Chants of "We belong! We belong!" rose like thunder, shaking the steps beneath her feet. Tears blurred Amira's vision, but she did not falter. For the first time, she felt the weight of her fear lifting, replaced by something stronger: resolve. Inside the mansion, Eleanor watched the rally on television, her face pale with fury. "She's nothing," she whispered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her doubt. "She's nothing," but Richard said nothing. He only stared at the screen, where Amira's voice echoed louder than their carefully crafted ads, their years of wealth, their empire of fear. Nathan, sipping his drink, gave a low whistle. "You're losing, Mother, and you don't even know how to stop it." Eleanor's hand trembled as she set her glass down. For the first time in decades, she felt powerless. Julian walked beside Amira as the rally dispersed, the night air crisp around them. "You turned the tide today," he said quietly. Amira shook her head. "Not me. Us. All of us." He smiled, pride in his eyes. "Maybe, but you lit the spark." She looked up at the city skyline, lights glittering like a promise. For the first time since the gala, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. And somewhere deep inside, Eleanor Whitmore felt something she had never known before. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of losing the only power she had ever known. The battle wasn't over. But the turning point had come, and nothing would ever be the same. The storm did not break all at once. It came in waves. First, it was the leaks. Documents slipped to journalists, emails and contracts revealing that the Whitmores had been siphoning money from state projects into shell companies. Catering contracts, construction bids, even education funds, inflated, redirected, laundered through a labyrinth of offshore accounts. What had begun as a scandal of cruelty was now a scandal of corruption. The press tore into it like wolves. Headlines screamed, "Governor Whitmore linked to financial crimes." Exclusive, leaked emails, tie Eleanor to kickback scheme. The story consumed the news cycle, eclipsing even the protests. Richard Whitmore stood in the mansion's study, fists clenched around a glass of bourbon. As his phone buzzed non-stop with calls he refused to answer. His empire, decades in the making, was collapsing in real time. Eleanor paced the room like a caged animal. "This is a witch hunt," she spat. "We are the victims here. Don't they see it? We built this city. We hosted them, fed them, clothed them, and now they turn on us?" But Richard wasn't listening. His face was gray, his hands trembling. He knew corruption could be denied, deflected, until the paper trail surfaced. And the paper trail had surfaced. Nathan, sprawled on the couch, smirked bitterly. "Guess the back door works both ways." "All those years shoving people through it, and now it's us being shoved out," Eleanor snapped. "Shut your mouth!" But her voice cracked, and the fury sounded more like desperation. On the streets, the protests grew. What had started as chants of "We belong" swelled into something bigger. No more corruption, no more Whitmores. Signs called for resignations, for justice, for an end to the dynasty that had loomed over the city for so long. Amira walked among the crowds, no longer invisible, no longer alone. Strangers stopped her, pressed her hands, thanked her. Some cried, some begged her to keep fighting. It terrified her, this weight of expectation, but it also gave her strength. For the first time, she understood what Julian had meant, that her story was not just her own. Still, in quiet moments, she wondered, what now? Was she to become a symbol forever, chained to this scandal? Or could she reclaim her life, her own dreams? Julian saw the questions in her eyes. One night, as they sat on a rooftop watching the city glow below, he said, "You don't owe anyone more than you're willing to give. You spoke your truth. That was enough. What you do next, that's your choice." Amira exhaled slowly, the weight lifting just slightly. Choice. It was something she had not been allowed for so long. The hammer fell weeks later. Federal investigators raided the Whitmore mansion at dawn, cameras catching every moment as agents marched past the iron gates. Eleanor's carefully curated image shattered in a single shot. Her, in a silk robe, glaring into flashing lights as agents carried out boxes of files. Richard, pale and grim, refused to comment, but the images told the story. By nightfall, indictments were announced. Fraud, bribery, conspiracy. The dynasty was crumbling. Eleanor tried to fight. She gave fiery speeches blaming radicals and the media, calling Amira a puppet of larger forces. But her words rang hollow, drowned by evidence and outrage. Each denial only made her smaller. Richard retreated, a shell of the commanding man he once was. Whispers spread that he was negotiating a plea deal, turning on old allies to save himself. For a man who had built his power on loyalty and image, it was the final betrayal. And Nathan? He disappeared into clubs and penthouses, his smirk fading into silence. Once touted as the heir to the dynasty, he was now a cautionary tale, the prince of nothing. The night the governor resigned, the city erupted. Crowds filled the streets cheering, singing, waving signs. Fireworks cracked in the sky above City Hall. It felt like an ending, a liberation. Amira stood at the edge of the crowd, tears streaking her cheeks. She hadn't sought this. She hadn't wanted this. But here it was, the fall of giants, the end of their reign. Julian found her in the throng, breathless. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "We did it. All of us," he smiled. "Maybe, but you lit the spark." Yet even in victory, choices remained. Organizations offered her positions, platforms. Activists begged her to lead marches, to become the face of a movement. Politicians courted her, wanting her endorsement. Her story. But in the quiet of her apartment, Amira stared at the stack of acceptance letters she had received months ago. Before any of this began, for graduate programs in linguistics, her true passion. Her hands trembled as she opened one. Reading the words she had almost forgotten. "We are pleased to offer you admission." For so long, she had been told she didn't belong. Now the world wanted her everywhere. But belonging, she realized, wasn't about their permission. It was about her choice. Weeks later, Amira walked through the university gates, books clutched to her chest, scarf fluttering in the autumn wind. Students rushed past, chattering about exams and protests about scandals and futures. No one stopped her. No one doubted her place. She belonged because she had chosen to. In the distance, a television in a cafe replayed footage of Eleanor Whitmore entering a courthouse, head bowed, cameras flashing. A dynasty in ruins. A reminder of what had been lost, Amira didn't stop to watch. She had her own life to live. Julian's words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to carry it alone. You spoke your truth. That was enough." She smiled softly, because sometimes the fall of the powerful wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of someone else's, and for Amira Qureshi, the story was just beginning.